My wife was jealous of my daughter, so she made a meticulous plan to remove her from our family when I found out I went nuclear and took everything from her, including her future when I married Rebecca 5 years ago. I was over the moon. I'd been a single dad for 3 years after losing my wife in a car wreck. Those years were hard, brutal. Even my daughter, Mia, was 10, and she just shut down. Emotionally, my son Jake was only 5 and didn't understand what was happening. So when Rebecca came along with her big smile, calm voice, and what felt like endless patience, I genuinely thought we'd all gotten a miracle. She baked, decorated the house with little touches that made it feel warm. The kids liked her enough. In the beginning, my son Jake was young and easily won over. My daughter Mia, who was 12 at the time, took longer to come around, but she was polite and made the effort. I was so proud of us. But then things shifted in ways that I didn't notice. At dinner, Rebecca would say things to Mia like, maybe skip the potatoes tonight, sweetie. You've been saying you want to fit into that dress for the recital. Always with a smile, always sounding helpful. Mia would go quiet. I'd give her a confused look like, is she overreacting? But I never said anything to Rebecca. I just told myself it was normal parenting. When Mia brought home a certificate for academic excellence, Rebecca congratulated her, but barely that same week, Jake got a sticker for best helper in kindergarten, and Rebecca baked a cake for him. Mia rolled her eyes, and I thought she was being petty. I didn't see it yet. I just didn't see it. A few months in, Rebecca cleaned up Mia's room while she was at school. She threw out boxes of stuff that belonged to Mia's mom, old note, scarves, birthday cards. She said they were moldy and smelled bad. Mia was quiet when she saw the room. I asked if she was okay, and she nodded, but later I saw her sitting on the porch hugging an old picture frame that Rebecca must have missed. Her shoulders were shaking. I didn't go out there. I thought she needed space. Things got worse when Rebecca started policing Mia's phone. She'd check her messages, delete apps, and say it was for her safety. Mia said it wasn't fair that Jake could do whatever he wanted. Rebecca told her boys were different. Every time I tried to talk to Mia alone, Rebecca would show up and interrupt or change the subject or start a new conversation that pulled my attention. It was so subtle I didn't catch it in real time. Mia started getting quieter. Her grades slipped. Her friends stopped coming around. Rebecca said she was acting out and had an attitude. She even told a few other moms that Mia was experimenting with substances. I heard that secondhand and didn't believe it, but I didn't confront Rebecca either. I was exhausted working full-time trying to hold this new family together. I thought maybe it was just hard for Mia to accept someone new. We tried therapy, or at least I thought we did. Rebecca turned on the waterworks the second we got in there. She told the therapist how hard she tried and how Mia shut her out. Mia just looked down at her lap and shrugged. Afterward, Rebecca said, "You saw how she treats me. What more can I do?" I didn't have an answer. Then came the night everything snapped. Mia had a panic attack. I found her on the floor, gasping, face pale, hands shaking. Rebecca rushed in and said, "We need to get her evaluated. She's not well." I held Mia while she sobbed and begged me not to send her away. Rebecca said, "She's manipulating you. She needs help." She showed me screenshots of texts she found on Mia's phone, stuff about pills and wanting to disappear. My stomach turned. I didn't want to believe it, but she had the evidence, and she was calm while Mia screamed and shook and cried that the screenshots were fake. I agreed to let the hospital evaluate her. I told myself it was the right thing. The house felt empty after I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how fast everything had escalated, about how tired Mia looked, how thin, how sad. I went to Rebecca's tablet to look for a grocery list. Her journal app popped up. I opened it without thinking. She had written everything, every plan, every lie she wrote about making Mia look unstable, about deleting messages, about how removing the girl would fix the family. She even mentioned faking screenshots and making calls to other parents. It was all there, cold and meticulous. I felt like throwing up when I confronted her. She denied it at first. Then she froze. Tears came out of nowhere. She said she was tired of living in my wife's shadow, that Mia never saw her as a mother, that she couldn't stand being second place. I didn't yell. I just stared at her and asked how she could do that to a child. She didn't answer. I didn't know what else to say. I told her to pack her things and get out of my house. She laughed at me, actually laughed, and said, "You can't just throw me out. We're married. This is my home too. Besides, who you think everyone will believe? The grieving widow who's clearly having a mental breakdown, or the caring stepmother who's been holding this family together?" That's when I remembered Mia. I ran upstairs to check on her, terrified of what Dakota might have done while I was sleeping. Thank God she was there, curled up in her bed. I woke her gently and told her we needed to leave right away. She looked confused but didn't ask questions, just grabbed her phone and a hoodie. I woke Jake too, telling him we were having a surprise breakfast out. Dakota followed us downstairs, still in her robe, demanding to know where we were going. I ignored her and ushered the kids into the car. As we backed out of the driveway, I saw her standing in the doorway, her face a mask of rage. That image still haunts me. I drove straight to my sister Barbara's house. It was barely 7 a.m. when we showed up at her door. Barbara took one look at my face and let us in without questions. Once the kids were settled with cereal in front of the TV, I showed her the printouts of Dakota's journal. Barbara read through them, her expression growing darker with each page. "Holy shit," she whispered. I always thought something was off about her, but this is psychotic. I told her I needed a safe place for the kids while I figured out what to do. Barbara immediately offered her guest room and pull out couch. Stay as long as you need, all of you. That morning was a blur of phone calls, first to my boss explaining I had a family emergency, then to a lawyer a friend had used for his divorce. The lawyer, Quinn, agreed to see me immediately. When I explained the situation, I left the kids with Barbara and drove to Quinn's office. She reviewed the journal printouts and listened to my story without interruption. When I finished, she looked at me seriously. "This is extremely concerning behavior. What Dakota has done constitutes emotional abuse of a minor. We need to act quickly to protect your children legally." She explained we needed to file for an emergency custody order and possibly a restraining order. She also strongly advised against returning to the house alone. People who engage in this level of manipulation can become dangerous when exposed. Take someone with you, preferably a police officer, if you need to get your belongings. I asked about the psychiatric evaluation that had been scheduled for Mia the next day. Quinn advised canceling it and instead having Mia see an independent therapist of our choosing who could properly evaluate her without Dakota's influence. Will explain to the new therapist exactly what's been happening. Their assessment will help counter any claims Dakota might make about Mia's mental health. On my way back to Barbara's, my phone exploded with texts and calls from Dakota. I didn't answer but saw the notifications. "Where are you with my children? You're making a huge mistake. I can explain everything if you just come home. Those journal entries aren't what you think." When I got back to Barbara's, I found Mia sitting alone in the guest room. She looked so small and vulnerable. I sat down next to her and asked how she was feeling. "Are we really not going back?" she asked quietly. "No, sweetheart, we're not. I found out some things about Dakota that show she hasn't been honest with us." Mia didn't look surprised. "She hates me, Dad. She's always hated me." That simple statement broke something in me. I pulled Mia into a hug and apologized over for not seeing what was happening, for not protecting her, for bringing Dakota into our lives. Mia cried against my shoulder, deep, racking sobs that seemed to come from years of held back tears. When she calmed down, she started telling me things, so many things that Dakota had said and done when I wasn't around. Comments about her weight, throwing away her clothes that didn't fit right, telling her that her dancing was not as special as she thought, restricting her phone and internet access while claiming to me that Mia was the one isolating herself. She told me, "You and Jake were happier when I wasn't around." Mia whispered, she said, "I reminded you of Mom and it made you sad, so I should stay in my room more." Every word was like a knife. How had I missed this? How had I let this woman poison my daughter's life for so long? Jake was confused about the whole situation. He kept asking when we were going home and why Dakota wasn't with us. I tried to explain in terms an 8-year-old could understand that Dakota had done some unkind things and wasn't being honest, so we needed some time away from her. He seemed to accept this, but I knew there would be more difficult conversations ahead. That afternoon, I contacted the psychiatric facility, and canceled Mia's evaluation. The intake coordinator sounded concerned and asked if Mia was getting help elsewhere. I explained we were consulting with another therapist and thanked her for understanding. Then I called our family doctor and scheduled appointments for both kids. I wanted a medical professional to document their current physical and emotional state. The doctor could only see us the following week, but she promised to note in their files that the appointments were requested as part of an ongoing family situation. Dakota didn't give up easily. She showed up at Barbara's house that evening, pounding on the door and demanding to see the kids. Barbara called the police while I kept Mia and Jake in the back bedroom. By the time officers arrived, Dakota had composed herself and was calmly explaining that her husband had taken the children without her knowledge, and she was worried. The officers asked to speak with me. I showed them the journal printouts and explained the situation. They seemed skeptical at first. Dakota presented so well, so normal, but agreed to file a report documenting the incident. They couldn't force her to leave since she was on public property, but they did advise her that causing a disturbance could result in her arrest. Dakota left, but not before looking directly at our bedroom window and mouthing something I couldn't make out. The sight sent chills down my spine. That nightmares, and ended up in bed with me. Mia stayed awake scrolling through her phone until I gently took it away around 2 a.m. She might be messaging you. I explained we need to be careful. The next morning, Barbara went with me to the house to collect essential items for the kids and myself. I half expected Dakota to be there, but the house was empty. It looked different, somehow colder, less like the home I remembered. I quickly packed clothes, school supplies, medications, and a few treasured possessions, including the remaining photos of Mary I could find in Mia's room. I noticed empty spaces on her shelves where I knew she'd kept mementos of her mother. Below her bed, I found torn photos and a broken picture frame. The sight made me physically sick. Dakota hadn't just hidden these things, she'd destroyed them. When we returned to Barbara's, I had an email from Quinn outlining our legal strategy. She'd filed for an emergency custody hearing and was preparing documentation for a restraining order. She explained that Dakota, as my spouse and the children's stepmother, did have certain legal rights we needed to address properly. The journal is compelling evidence, she wrote, but be prepared for Dakota to claim it was fictional writing, therapy, journaling, or even that you fabricated it. She advised collecting any other evidence of Dakota's behavior: text messages, emails, social media posts, witness statements from teachers or friends who had observed changes in Mia. She also suggested I check our financial accounts immediately. That was a smart call. When I logged into our joint bank account, I discovered Dakota had transferred nearly $15,000 to her personal account. That morning, I called the bank in a panic, but they explained that as a joint account holder, she had every right to move that money. Another painful lesson in how vulnerable I'd made myself and my children. I texted Dakota about the money. Her response was chilling: consider it payment for babysitting your troubled kids for the past year. You'll need that money for Mia's therapy anyway. I forwarded the text to Quinn, who added it to our growing file of evidence. Later that day, Mia's school counselor called. Dakota had contacted the school claiming there was a family misunderstanding and that Mia would be returning home that afternoon. Thankfully, the counselor had the presence of mind to contact me directly to confirm. I explained that Dakota was no longer authorized to make decisions for Mia and promised to provide legal documentation as soon as possible. This prompted a call to Jake's elementary school as well. I spoke with his principal, giving only the barest details that we were separated from Dakota and that she should not be allowed to pick him up or make decisions about his schooling. The principal was understanding but firm about needing proper documentation. 3 days after discovering the journal, we had our emergency custody hearing. Quinn had prepared me for what to expect, but nothing could have readied me for seeing Dakota in the courtroom dressed conservatively, her expression a perfect blend of confusion and concern. Her attorney portrayed her as a loving stepmother blindsided by her husband's erratic behavior. They suggested I was having some kind of delayed grief reaction and had become paranoid. The journal, they argued, was a creative writing exercise Dakota had done as part of her own grief counseling, imagining worst-case scenarios to work through her anxieties about blending our family. It was so convincing that even I started questioning myself for a moment. Was I overreacting? Was there an innocent explanation I hadn't considered? Then Mia was called to speak with the judge privately in chambers. I don't know exactly what she said, but when they returned, the judge's demeanor toward Dakota had noticeably cooled. He granted me temporary full custody of both children and issued a temporary restraining order preventing Dakota from contacting us or coming within 100 feet of our home, the kids' schools, or Barbara's house. The court takes allegations of psychological abuse very seriously, he stated. Until a full investigation can be conducted, the priority must be the children's safety and well-being. Dakota showed no reaction to the ruling, no outrage, no tears, nothing. That controlled blankness was somehow more frightening than any outburst would have been. Outside the courthouse, she brushed past me and whispered, "This isn't over. They always believed the children at first, but then the truth comes out. Enjoy your victory while it lasts." The next few weeks were a strange mix of relief and constant anxiety. We stayed with Barbara while looking for a new place to live. I couldn't imagine returning to the house I'd shared with Dakota, where so much damage had been done to my family. Besides, I'd learned Dakota was still living there and refusing to leave. Mia started seeing a new therapist, Dr. Morgan, who specialized in trauma and emotional abuse. After just 2 sessions, Dr. Morgan requested to speak with me privately. Mia has described a textbook case of parental alienation and psychological abuse. She explained Dakota systematically undermined Mia's self-worth, isolated her from support systems, and attempted to destroy her relationship with you. The fact that she targeted mementos of Mia's mother is particularly concerning. She was literally trying to erase Mia's connection to her past. Dr. Morgan recommended keeping Mia's therapy sessions frequent while we navigated the legal process. She also suggested finding a separate therapist for Jake, who was struggling in his own way. Unlike Mia, Jake had been Dakota's favorite, the child she used to demonstrate what a wonderful mother she could be. He was confused and hurt by the sudden changes in his life and sometimes asked when he could see Dakota again. This created tension between the siblings. Mia couldn't understand why Jake would want to see someone who had hurt her so badly. Jake didn't fully grasp what Dakota had done wrong. They argued frequently, with Jake accusing Mia of making up stories and Mia calling Jake Dakota's little puppet. I tried my best to mediate these conflicts while dealing with the ongoing legal battle. Dakota had countersued for custody, claiming I was alienating the children from her and that Mia had pre-existing mental health issues. I was neglecting her. Attorney submitted evidence, social media posts where Mia had expressed typical teenage angst, school records showing her declining grades, which had begun after Dakota moved in, and statements from Dakota's friends who claimed to have witnessed Mia being disrespectful and troubled. The most disturbing submission was a psychological analysis from a therapist who had never actually met Mia. This person, based solely on Dakota's descriptions, suggested Mia might have borderline personality disorder or be experiencing psychosis. Quinn was able to get this thrown out, but the mere existence of such a document showed how far Dakota was willing to go. Throughout all this, Dakota maintained a public image of the heartbroken stepmother. She posted frequently on social media about missing her kids and praying for healing. For our broken family, she joined support groups for alienated parents and shared articles about false accusations in divorce cases. Some of our mutual friends believed her narrative. I received messages asking why I was being so harsh, suggesting we try marriage counseling, insisting Dakota deserved a chance to explain herself. Some even suggested Mia might be lying or exaggerating for attention. I cut those people out of our lives immediately. One unexpected bright spot came when Jake's teacher, Mrs. Ree, contacted me. She had noticed changes in Jake's behavior over the past year: increased anxiety, seeking constant approval, becoming upset over small mistakes, and had attempted to discuss her concerns with Dakota during parent-teacher conferences. Dakota had dismissed her observations and suggested Mrs. Rhee was picking on Jake. Mrs. Rhee offered to provide a statement about these interactions for our court case. Her professional observations of Jake's behavioral changes and Dakota's dismissive response provided valuable third-party evidence of the negative impact Dakota had on our family. About a month after we left, we moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't fancy, just a 3-bedroom unit in a decent complex, but it was ours, and Dakota had never set foot in it. The kids decorated their rooms however they wanted. Mia covered her walls with dance posters and photos of her friends. Jake chose a space theme with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. I hung photos of Mary in the living room and in each of the kids' rooms. I wanted them to know their mother was still part of our family, that her memory would never again be hidden away or diminished. Mia cried when I gave her a newly framed photo of herself with Mary. It wasn't the original that was gone forever, but it was a start. Our first weekend in the new apartment, we held a small ceremony. We each wrote down something we wanted to leave behind: a fear, a bad memory, a hurt feeling, and burned the papers in a small fireproof dish on the balcony. Then we wrote things we wanted to bring into our new home: peace, honesty, trust, love, and posted them on the refrigerator. It was cheesy, but it helped mark the transition. Dakota, meanwhile, escalated her campaign. She somehow obtained my new work email and sent messages to my colleagues expressing concern about my mental state. She contacted my parents, telling them I was keeping their grandchildren from them. Completely untrue. They visited the weekend after we moved, and she even reported me to Child Protective Services, claiming the children were living in unsafe conditions. The CPS visit was terrifying, but ultimately helpful to our case. The social worker who came to our apartment was thorough and professional. She interviewed me and both children, separately inspected our living conditions, and reviewed the documentation I had about the situation. With Dakota, her report concluded there were no safety concerns and noted that both children appeared to be well cared for and emotionally supported in a weird way. Dakota's actions were making our case stronger. Each false report, each violation of the restraining order, each attempt to manipulate people in our lives demonstrated exactly the behavior pattern described in her journal. 2 months after leaving, we had our full custody hearing. By then, we had accumulated substantial evidence. Dakota's journal statements from Mia and Jake's therapist's Mrs. Reese's professional observations, documentation of Dakota's attempts to interfere with the children's school's records of Dakota's social media campaign and harassment, the favorable CPS report, my own detailed timeline of events from when Dakota entered our lives. The judge, after reviewing everything, awarded me permanent full custody of both children. Dakota was granted supervised visitation with Jake. Only Mia, at 14, was considered old enough to decide for herself, and she wanted no contact. Even Jake's visitation was contingent on Dakota completing a psychological evaluation and parenting classes outside the courtroom. Dakota approached me despite the restraining order. Her attorney tried to pull her back, but she shook him off. "You think you've won, but you haven't," she said quietly. "Those kids will never forget me. Jake loves me more than he loves you, and Mia, she'll never trust anyone again because of what you let happen. That's my real legacy in your precious family." A bailiff intervened before I could respond, escorting Dakota away. Her words haunted me, though. Was she right? Had the damage she'd done changed my children forever? That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat alone in our small living room looking at a photo of Mary. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I let her hurt our babies. I didn't protect them the way you would have." The next morning, Mia found me asleep on the couch, the photo still in my hand. She sat down beside me and gently woke me up. "Dad, can we talk?" We went to the kitchen and I made coffee for myself and hot chocolate for her. Our new morning ritual. She seemed nervous, twisting her mug in her hands. "I heard what she said to you yesterday at court," Mia finally said, "about Jake and me." I sighed. "You shouldn't have had to hear that." "No, but I did, and she's wrong. Jake doesn't love her more than you. He's just confused because she gave him so much attention, and me, she took a deep breath. I do have trust issues now, but that's not your fault. You believed me when it mattered most. She reached across the table and took my hand. We're going to be okay, Dad, not perfect, but okay, and that's enough for now, my smart, resilient daughter. In that moment, I saw so much of Mary in her, not just in her appearance, but in her strength, her capacity for forgiveness, her wisdom beyond her years. 3 days later, Dakota violated the restraining order again by sending a package to our apartment. Inside was a framed photo of her with Jake and a note that read, "Some bonds can't be broken." I reported it to the police and our attorney. I also increased security at our apartment, installing a doorbell camera and better locks. I spoke with the apartment manager about not allowing Dakota on the property and provided them with her photo. We changed our routines, taking different routes to school and work, varying our schedules when possible. Living under this cloud of anxiety was exhausting, but each day brought small improvements. Mia rejoined her dance team. Jake made friends in our new apartment complex. I started cooking actual meals instead of just ordering takeout. We were building a new normal step by step. The divorce proceedings dragged on, complicated by Dakota's refusal to negotiate fairly on property division. She remained in our old house, claiming she had nowhere else to go. Quinn advised that forcing the sale of the house would likely provoke more retaliation, so we focused on finalizing the custody arrangement first. About 4 months after we left Dakota's supervised visitation with Jake began. The first visit was tense. Jake was excited but nervous. He asked me repeatedly if I was mad at him for wanting to see Dakota. I assured him I wasn't, that his feelings were valid, and he hadn't done anything wrong. I waited anxiously in the visitation center's parent room during the 1-hour visit. When it ended, Jake came out looking confused. Later, he told me Dakota had spent most of the time asking questions about our new apartment, my work schedule, and whether Mia was seeing anyone outside of school. The supervisor had intervened several times to redirect the conversation. After the third visit followed the same pattern. Jake's therapist suggested pausing the visitation. Jake agreed, admitting he didn't really enjoy the visits and they made him feel squirmy inside. Dakota's response was to file yet another motion with the court, claiming I was coaching Jake to reject her. The judge, by now familiar with the pattern, denied the motion and ordered Dakota to complete the previously mandated psychological evaluation before any further visitation would be considered. 6 months into our new life, we experienced our first real period of calm. Dakota's attempts at contact became less frequent. The divorce proceedings, while still contentious, moved forward with clear boundaries established. The kids settled into their new schools and made friends in the apartment complex. Mia's 15th birthday arrived, and we planned a small celebration at a local restaurant with a few close friends. The day before, she asked if we could visit Mary's grave together. Before the party, we hadn't been since before Dakota entered our lives. The cemetery was quiet that Saturday morning. I hung back a bit, giving Mia privacy as she stood before her mother's headstone. I watched her, talking softly, occasionally wiping tears from her cheeks. After about 15 minutes, she motioned for me to join her. We stood there together, my arm around her shoulders. I told Mom everything Mia said about Dakota, about how we left, about our new apartment. I told her I miss her every day, but I'm doing better now. I squeezed her shoulder. She would be so proud of you, Mia, so incredibly proud. Jake had opted to stay with Barbara. During our cemetery visit at 8, he had fewer clear memories of Mary and found cemetery scary when we picked him up. Afterward, he presented Mia with a homemade birthday card featuring a surprisingly good drawing of her in a dance pose that evening at the restaurant, surrounded by Mia's friends, my sister, and a couple of my close friends who had stood by us. I watched Mia laugh and talk animatedly about her upcoming dance competition. The change in her from 6 months ago was remarkable. She had reclaimed pieces of herself that Dakota had tried to destroy. As the waiter brought out Mia's birthday cake, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Happy birthday to my favorite stepdaughter. I'm closer than you think. I showed the message to Barbara, who immediately contacted the police officer who had been handling our case. He promised to look into it, but warned that if Dakota had used a burner phone, it might be difficult to prove it was from her. I didn't tell Mia about the text. I wouldn't let Dakota ruin this day. But later that night, after everyone was asleep, I sat awake by the front door, jumping at every sound from the hallway outside our apartment. The next morning, I installed additional security cameras and changed the locks again just to be safe. I also spoke with the kids' schools, alerting them to the potential contact and ensuring all staff knew Dakota was not authorized to communicate with the children. 2 days later, I received an email from Quinn. Dakota had finally completed her court-ordered psychological evaluation. The diagnosis: narcissistic personality disorder with elements of borderline personality disorder. The evaluator noted Dakota's inability to empathize with others, particularly those she perceives as rivals for attention, and her pattern of manipulative behavior aimed at maintaining control. The report recommended extensive therapy before any unsupervised contact with children should be considered. Based on this evaluation and Dakota's continued boundary violations, Quinn believed we had grounds to request termination of all visitation rights. While this information validated everything we'd experienced, it also frightened me. Dakota now had nothing left to lose. The courts had seen through her facade. Her legal options were dwindling. What would someone with her psychological profile do? When cornered that weekend, Jake had a little league game. It was a beautiful spring day, the kind Mary would have loved. I sat in the bleachers with Mia, both of us cheering as Jake's team took the field. In that ordinary moment, watching my son play baseball, my daughter beside me complaining about homework, I felt a glimmer of the normal family life we were slowly rebuilding. Then I saw her. Dakota was standing at the far end of the field, partially hidden behind a tree. She wasn't approaching or making any scene, just watching. Our eyes met briefly across the distance, and she smiled, not a warm smile, but something calculating and cold that made my blood freeze. I immediately reported the sighting to the police, who sent an officer to the field, but by then she was gone. The incident was documented as another violation of the restraining order, but without photographic evidence. It was just my word against hers. If she denied being there that night, I lay awake wondering what Dakota's endgame was. What did she want? If she truly cared about the children, wouldn't she respect the boundaries that gave them stability? If she was only using them to get to me, what was her ultimate goal? I didn't have to wonder long. The next morning, I drove the kids to school and returned to find my apartment door slightly ajar. Heart pounding, I called the police. Before entering, they arrived quickly and cleared the apartment. No one was inside, but it was clear someone had been there. Nothing valuable was taken, not my laptop, not the TV, not even the cash in my dresser drawer, but on my bedroom wall, where a photo of Mary had hung, there was now a photo of Dakota with the kids, taken during happier times. On the back, she had written, "Families are forever. I'll always be their mother too." I filed another police report and had them dust for fingerprints, but honestly, I already knew it was Dakota. The officer looked uncomfortable as he explained there wasn't much they could do beyond adding it to our case file. I was starting to feel like I was living in some twisted psychological horror movie where nobody could help us. After the break-in, I decided we couldn't stay in the apartment anymore. Dakota knew where we lived, and the thought of her having access to our space while we were gone made me physically sick. I called Barbara in a panic, and she immediately offered her place again, but I knew that wasn't a long-term solution. That night, I sat Mia and Jake down and told them we needed to move again. Jake started crying immediately. He just made friends in the complex and didn't want to leave. Mia got this resigned look on her face that broke my heart, like she expected her life to be disrupted forever because of Dakota. I'm sorry, guys, I know this stinks, but we need to be somewhere safe. I started apartment hunting the next day, focusing on buildings with better security. I found a place about 30 minutes away with controlled access, security cameras, and an underground parking garage. It was more expensive, but at that point I would have paid anything for peace of mind. While we were preparing to move, Quinn called with an update. Dakota had violated the restraining order enough times that we Had grounds to request her arrest. I hesitated, worried that escalating things might push Dakota to more extreme measures, but ultimately agreed. Dakota needed real consequences. 2 days later, I got a call from the police. They'd attempted to serve the warrant at our old house, but Dakota wasn't there. According to neighbors, she hadn't been seen in several days. Her car was gone, and mail was piling up. She had disappeared. This news should have been relieving, but instead it terrified me. If Dakota wasn't at home, where was she? Was she watching us, planning something? The uncertainty was almost worse than knowing she was nearby. We moved into the new apartment in record time. I didn't tell anyone our new address except Barbara. The kids' schools with strict instructions about confidentiality, and my boss. I even started using a P.O. box for mail. The building manager was understanding when I explained we had a restraining order against someone, and he agreed to alert security if Dakota ever showed up. For the first week in our new place, I barely slept. Every noise in the hallway made me jump. I checked the locks multiple times each night and kept my phone by my bed in case we needed to call 911. The kids picked up on my anxiety, which made them anxious too. Jake started having nightmares again, and Mia became hypervigilant, texting me constantly when we were apart. About 2 weeks after the move, I got an unexpected call from the police department in a small town about 3 hours away. An officer named James explained they had detained Dakota after she caused a disturbance at a hotel. She was drunk and making threats against you and your family. Officer James said the hotel staff called us when she refused to leave the lobby. When we ran her ID, we saw the outstanding warrant from your county. I felt a rush of relief knowing Dakota was in custody, quickly followed by dread when James continued, "She'll be transferred back to your county tomorrow. Just wanted to give you a heads up since she made some pretty specific threats." I thanked him and immediately called Quinn, who advised me to request an emergency hearing to modify the restraining order, making it more comprehensive. She also suggested requesting GPS monitoring if Dakota was released on bail. 2 days later, I sat in the courtroom watching Dakota being led. In wearing an orange jumpsuit, she looked nothing like the polished, put-together woman who had charmed her way into our lives. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes bloodshot. When she saw me, her expression shifted from surprise to intense hatred. The judge reviewed the case file, including the new incident report from the hotel. Dakota's court-appointed attorney argued for release on her own recognizance, claiming she had been under extreme emotional distress due to being separated from her children. The prosecutor countered by reading the statement from the hotel staff, which included Dakota's explicit threats to make him sorry and take back what's mine. He also presented the psychological evaluation diagnosing her with personality disorders and the pattern of restraining order violations. The judge denied bail, ordering Dakota to remain in custody until a full hearing could be held. He also granted the expanded restraining order, which now included provisions prohibiting any form of contact, including through third parties. As Dakota was let out, she turned to look at me one last time. "This isn't over," she mouthed, just like she had that first day in court. A chill ran down my spine, but I held her gaze until the bailiff escorted her through the side door. Outside the courthouse, Quinn placed a hand on my shoulder. "This is good progress, but stay vigilant. The charges for violating the restraining order and breaking into your apartment won't keep her locked up forever." She was right. Of course, Dakota would eventually get out, and we needed to be prepared, but for the first time in months, I could breathe a little easier knowing she wasn't out there watching us, planning her next move. That weekend, we had our first truly relaxed family day in ages. We went to a movie, had ice cream, and spent the afternoon at a park far from our old neighborhood. Jake laughed more than I'd heard in months, and Mia actually left her phone in her pocket instead of constantly checking it for threatening messages at home. That evening, Mia asked if we could look through some old photos of Mary. We hadn't done this in a long time, partly because Dakota had accidentally damaged or misplaced so many of them, and partly because it had become such a fraught topic in our household. I pulled out the box of pictures I'd managed to save and spread Them across the living room floor there was Mary on our wedding day, radiant in her simple white dress, Mary holding newborn Mia with an expression of complete wonder, Mary teaching Jake to ride a bike, her hands steadying the back of his seat. I forgot how pretty Mom was, Jake said, picking up a beach photo. She was beautiful, I agreed. Inside and out, Mia was quiet, studying a photo of Mary at her dance recital. Dakota tried to convince me that Mom wouldn't be proud of my dancing, she finally said. She said Mom was probably a much better dancer than I'd ever be. The casual cruelty of that comment hit me like a physical blow. Your mom would be incredibly proud of you, Mia. She always was. I know that now, Mia said, looking up with a small smile. Dakota couldn't erase Mom no matter how hard she tried. The next few weeks fell into a new rhythm. Dakota remained in jail awaiting her hearing. The kids settled into the new apartment and their routines. I managed to sleep through most nights without checking the locks multiple times. We weren't normal yet, but we were getting closer. Then came the letter. It arrived at my P.O. box, handwritten on prison stationery. Quinn had advised not opening any communication from Dakota, but forwarding it to her office instead. I followed her instructions, dropping it off that same day. Quinn called me the following morning. I think you should see this, she said, her voice tight. It's concerning. I went to her office during my lunch break. She handed me the letter, now in a clear evidence bag. Dakota's handwriting was neat and controlled. Dear family, by the time you read this, things will have changed. I've had plenty of time to think in here, and I've realized fighting for visitation through the courts is pointless. The system is rigged against stepmothers like me who only wanted to help. I know now what I need to do. They can't keep me in here forever. And when I get out, I'll find you. You can change your address, your phone numbers, even your names, but I'll always find my way back to my family. Jake asks about me. I know he does. Mia pretends to hate me, but she'll understand someday why I had to be firm with her, and you'll realize what you threw away. Sleep well while you can, with eternal love, Dakota. My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. Is this a direct threat? Can we use this to keep her locked up longer? Quinn sighed. It's veiled enough that her attorney could argue it's not an explicit threat, but yes, we'll submit it to the prosecutor and the judge. I left Quinn's office feeling like I had a target on my back. Dakota's letter confirmed my worst fears. She wasn't giving up. This wasn't going to end. When she got out of jail that evening, I asked Barbara to watch the kids and met with Officer Elizabeth, who had been handling our case from the beginning. I showed her a copy of Dakota's letter. Legally, my hands are tied until she does something, she explained, frustration evident in her voice. But off the record, I'd be looking at relocating if I were you. Not just a new apartment, a new city. Her words hit me hard. Relocate. Leave behind our jobs, school, support system. It seemed extreme, but then again, everything about this situation was extreme. When I got home, I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled out my phone, scrolling through job listings in other cities. Could we really start over somewhere completely new? Would Dakota still find us? Would it be worth uprooting the kids again? I was still weighing these questions when Mia knocked on my door. She took one look at my face and asked what happened now. I hesitated, not wanting to burden her with adult problems, but remembering how keeping secrets had created space for Dakota's manipulation. Dakota sent a letter. It was concerning. I'm trying to figure out what to do. Mia sat beside me. She's still trying to control us, isn't she? I nodded. What if we just left? Mia suggested quietly. Moved somewhere she couldn't find us. The fact that my 15-year-old had reached the same conclusion as Officer Elizabeth spoke volumes. You'd be okay with that, leaving your school, your dance team, your friends? Mia shrugged. I'd miss them, but I'd rather have peace. Jake might have a harder time understanding, though. We talked for over an hour, weighing options, considering cities, discussing logistics. It wasn't a decision to make lightly, but having Mia's perspective helped clarify my thinking. The next day, Dakota's hearing was scheduled. I planned to attend, wanting to see firsthand what we were dealing with before leaving for the courthouse. I called Jake's school to check on him, a habit I developed during all the custody proceedings. The school secretary's voice sounded strained. Mr. Anderson, I was just about to call you. We had an incident this morning. My heart nearly stopped. Is Jake okay? He's fine, but a woman tried to sign him out of School about an hour ago, she claimed to be his aunt, but she wasn't on the approved pickup list when our front desk staff refused to release him. She became agitated. Security escorted her off campus. I gripped the phone tighter. Did you get her name? What did she look like? She didn't give a name, but the description. The secretary paused. It matches the photo you provided of your ex-wife. We've already called the police. Dakota out of jail, trying to take Jake. My mind raced through the implications. How had she been released without notification? Why wasn't I informed of a bail hearing? I called Officer Elizabeth immediately while racing to Jake's school. She sounded as confused as I was. There was no scheduled release. Let me check the system, she called back. 5 minutes later, as I was pulling into the school parking lot, there was a clerical error. The charges were entered incorrectly, and she was released on bond. This morning, we're already working to revoke it based on this new violation. But right now, we don't know where she is. I ran into the school showing my ID at the front desk. The principal met and escorted me to the office where Jake was waiting, looking confused but unharmed. Dad, what's going on? Is school canceled? I hugged him tightly. No, buddy, I just needed to see you. We're going to go get Mia and have a family day. Okay. I signed Jake out properly and called Mia's school on the way, explaining the situation in coded language so Jake wouldn't panic. The high school administration understood immediately and had Mia ready when we arrived. As we drove home, Mia kept looking over her shoulder, checking for cars that might be following us. Jake, picking up on our tension, became quiet. In the back seat at home, I packed essentials while Mia helped Jake gather his favorite toys. We were leaving, not permanently yet, but at least until Dakota was back in custody. I booked a hotel room in another county under Barbara's name and used cash to avoid leaving an electronic trail. Just as we were loading the car, my phone rang. It was Quinn. Dakota turned herself and she said without preamble, about 20 minutes ago, she's claiming she never went to Jake's school, that she's being framed. I looked at Jake's safe in our back seat. That's nonsense. The school has security cameras. I know the police are getting the footage now. She'll be held without bail this time. But Quinn paused. This pattern of behavior combined with her psychological evaluation gives us grounds to request permanent termination of all parental rights and possibly a lifetime restraining order. We still went to the hotel that night, needing the distance and security as the kids slept in the adjoining room. I researched our options. Online termination of parental rights was extreme and difficult to obtain, but Dakota's escalating behavior made it necessary. The next morning, we returned home to find police cars outside our building. My heart sank, thinking Dakota had somehow been released again, but Officer Elizabeth met us in the lobby with different news. We executed a search warrant on Dakota's devices after her arrest yesterday. She explained found some disturbing things. She had detailed plans to take Jake to another state, fake IDs, bus tickets, the works. There was also a document outlining ways to make Mia disappear so she couldn't interfere anymore. A chill ran through me at her words. This wasn't just manipulation or control anymore. Dakota had been planning to kidnap Jake and potentially harm Mia. We're charging her with attempted kidnapping in addition to the restraining order violations. Officer Elizabeth continued. With the evidence we have, she's looking at serious prison time. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, police interviews, and therapy appointments. Dakota remained in jail, denied bail due to the severity of the new charges. Her public defender attempted to argue she was mentally unfit to stand trial, but the psychological evaluation she'd already undergone worked against her. She had been diagnosed with personality disorders, not psychosis. Eventually, Dakota accepted a plea deal, 5 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation, during which she could have no contact whatsoever with me or the children. The judge also granted the permanent termination of her parental rights, an outcome rare in cases not involving biological parents. On the day of her sentencing, I attended court alone. Mia had considered coming but decided against it, saying she didn't want to give Dakota the satisfaction of seeing her upset. Jake was too young to understand the proceedings. Dakota looked small in her orange jumpsuit. Her confidence finally shattered when Allowed to speak, she turned to face me. Directly, I only wanted to be loved. She said, her voice cracking, to be part of a real family. Everything I did was because I loved them too much. The judge was unmoved. Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't threaten. Love doesn't plan kidnappings, he stated firmly before announcing the sentence. As Dakota was led away, she didn't look back. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in years. We had 5 years of guaranteed safety time for the kids to grow, heal, and build lives without looking over their shoulders. That evening, we had a small celebration. Dinner at home, nothing fancy, just pizza and ice cream, but it felt significant. Mia actually invited a friend over, something she hadn't felt comfortable doing since the whole ordeal began. Jake laughed and played without the nervous edge that had become so common later. After the kids went to bed, I sat on our balcony looking at the city lights. We would stay here. I decided no need to relocate now. This was our home, and we wouldn't let Dakota take that from us. 6 months later, life had found a new normal. Mia joined a competitive dance team and started talking about college applications, even though she was only a sophomore. Jake excelled in school and made new friends who had never heard of Dakota. I even went on a few casual dates, though nothing serious. I wasn't ready for that yet, and maybe wouldn't be for a long time. On the anniversary of Mary's death, we visited her grave together. We brought fresh flowers and spent time telling her about our year. Jake drew a picture that we left propped against her headstone. Mia performed a short dance she had choreographed in her mother's memory as we were leaving the cemetery. Mia linked her arm through mine. Dad, remember when you found Dakota's journal that night when everything changed? I nodded, surprised. She wanted to discuss it. I was so scared that night, she continued, but also relieved because I finally felt like someone was going to believe me. I'll always believe you, Mia, I said, squeezing her arm. Both of you, I added, ruffling Jake's hair with my free hand. I know, she said simply. That's how I know we're going to be okay. And walking to the car with my children on that clear autumn day, I knew she was right. We weren't perfect. We still had scars from what Dakota had done to us, but we were healing day by day, rebuilding the family that had almost been destroyed. Dakota had tried to erase Mary from our lives, to replace her and remake our family in her image. Instead, she had inadvertently made Mary's memory stronger, more precious to all of us. In trying to tear us apart, she had ultimately brought us closer together. Sometimes at night, I still check the locks twice and jump at unexpected sounds. Sometimes Mia still has nightmares, and Jake still asks difficult questions about why people hurt each other, but these moments come less frequently now.